Hi, everybody. Welcome back to 282. Today, we are going to be learning about probability. This is a really complicated topic and one that I think is really important. Um, I will also say that in the Whitlock and Schluter book, you can find a much deeper dive into probability, how to calculate probabilities by hand, how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide probabilities, and things like that. In a lot of statistical classes, you spend a good amount of time actually doing all of that by hand. And I think there's value to that. But I also think that what we're trying to do as environmental scientists right now in this space is learn how to become familiar enough and capable enough with R and statistics and graphs and also analyzing graphs and data to be dangerous. We're trying to do enough to be capable at doing quantitative environmental science. And I don't necessarily think that digging really deeply into how to do lots of probability by hand is the best use of our time. So if you're really interested in it, or you really want to dive deeper because it helps you understand the concept, I encourage you to check out the Whitlock and Schluter book. You can also come talk to me in my office. But we are going to talk about concept of probability and how we might apply basic principles of probability to some of our ideas that we're building towards, which would be like for hypothesis testing, for building graphs, and for doing stats. So let's first by talking about what probability is. And we are not going to do this particular demonstration, but maybe we will do it in class. So put you in groups, think about probability. So instead, I'll just jump right ahead. Probability is defined as the proportion of times an event would occur if we repeated a random trial over and over again under the same conditions. Probability ranges between 0 and 1 or between 0 and 100%. So we think of probability in percentages or in decimals that are approximating or that are representing percentages. So the number of times something would happen if we took a bunch of samples over and over again, or did a bunch of trials over and over again under the same conditions. So like we flip a coin 100 times, what's the probability of heads? That kind of thing. That's actually just going to be in the way. Probability is based on the concept of a random trial, in which a process has two or more possible outcomes that cannot be predicted with certainty. Only one outcome can be observed from each repetition. Mutually exclusive is what we call that. And like we said, flipping a coin, rolling a die, picking a card. So we've seen this concept before. We've been working with probabilities since we were quite young. We pretty much understand the general idea. But how do you calculate probability? This is often a sticking point. So we need to understand what happened, what event we're interested in, and we also need to know the probability of all possible outcomes of a random trial. There's like 3 or 4 typos in that one sentence. That's pretty impressive. Okay. A shorthand for writing probability is as follows. PR of A, the probability of event A happening. If A is picking a card, then the probability of picking a 2 of spades, which is the card I chose, is 1 in 52, assuming a normal deck, because a deck of cards has 52 cards in it. Let's do a little practice. What's the probability of our class having a left-handed student? We have 6 students in our class. What's the probability of our class having a student who plays an instrument? What is the probability of you pick some sort of question? So what's the probability of our class having a left-handed student? We would assume, I don't know, 33% left-handedness. We have 6 people in our class. So we could say the probability is what? 2 out of 6, something like that. And that's going to give us 33%, right? So probability is 33. But we could also just survey the class. Hey, who's left-handed? I would raise my hand. I don't really count, but I'm left-handed. And we could calculate the actual proportion of our class that's left-handed as well. What's the probability of our class having a student who plays an instrument? We'd have to go look and see what like the ratio is of students who play instruments here at Bates. Might be better to do like, what's the probability of our class having a student who plays a sport? Something on the order of 45 to 55% of Bates students are on a sports team. So the probability would be like 45 to 55 for one student, right? And there's a good chance we have more than one student. Okay, pretty simple. Let's talk about the idea of mutual exclusivity. Mutually exclusive means 2 events that cannot occur at the same time. what's the probability of A and B happening? It has to be 0. There has to be no chance that both things can happen. So what's the probability of having heads and tails at the same time? There's a 0% probability of that. We can't have it. What are some examples? Other than that one, flipping a coin, it has to land heads or tails, or it lands on its side. If it lands on its side, which is really unlikely, it's still not heads and tails, it's the side, right? If I draw a 2 of spades, I can't be drawing a 2 of clubs. They can't be the same card, right? So mutual exclusivity is really easy. If I'm rolling a 6-sided die and I roll a 1, I can't be rolling a 6 at the same time. If I'm rolling a 20-sided die, I can't roll a 19 and a 3 at the same time, right? I have to only get one option. They are mutually exclusive. One cannot happen when the other is happening. If I'm drawing 2 cards, I can, in fact, draw a 2 of spades and a 2 of clubs, one after the other. That is possible. So that's something I can calculate. That's a little bit more complex probability equation. So mutual exclusivity is pretty straightforward. And we've already talked a little bit about probability distributions, well, sampling distributions. And now we're looking at probability distributions. They're basically the same idea. Probability distributions lists or graphics of all mutually exclusive outcomes of a random trial. These can be discrete or continuous. Discrete means they happen in bins, like you see over here with the probability, the sum of 2 dice. If you roll 2 die, they add up to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, or 12. They can't add up to anything in between. A continuous example of a probability distribution is on the right, where we're seeing all the possible options between -3 and 3. We can have -3, we can have -2.9, we can have -2.99999. We can have 0, 1, 1.5, 2.5. We can have all these numbers in between 0 or -3 and 3. Versus the sum of 2 dice, it's a bunch of discrete values, right? So our discrete values are in our histogram, and then we have a probability density function and our continuous function. Here comes some calculus. Just a reminder, that is a thing that exists. Probability densities kind of look like this. When we look at a probability density curve, what we're actually doing is calculating the area under that curve, right? What's the probability of something being between A and B? We calculate the area under that curve. We can use calculus for that. We can also do binning with Riemann sums. There's lots of ways we can do this. If you're not familiar with calculus, totally fine. Just to say that if you've seen calculating the area under a curve before, yeah, we can do that. The probability for continuous variables is more complex than discrete ones. And here's a whole bunch of reasons why. There's infinite outcomes. The probability is very, very small of getting a specific outcome, but instead we look for like, what's the probability of being in this range between A and B? We can measure this using bars, which is the Riemann sums, or we can measure it with the area under the curve, so we can integrate as well. Nobody's making you do either of those things. And again, if you've never seen that before, that's okay. If you have, at least now you can see an application of calculus in the real world in the wild. Sometimes when we're doing probability, which underlies our statistics to solve problems in our field, this is what that's based off of. Okay, sometimes we want to know the probability of 2 things happening, or of one thing or another thing happening. If 2 events are mutually exclusive, we might want to know what's the probability of A or B happening. For example, what is the probability of drawing a 2 of spades or a 3 of clubs? The probability of drawing a 2 of spades is 1 in 52. The probability of drawing a 3 of clubs, assuming that we're putting the card back after we draw it, is 1 in 52. So if you're adding probabilities together, the probability of A or the probability of B, if you see or, that means we're adding. Or means add. Probability 2 of spades plus probability 3 of clubs, that's 1 in 52 plus 1 in 52. That turns out to be, unsurprisingly, 2 in 52. Okay, so look at this chart of blood types. What's the probability of a person having blood type O? They have to be O positive or O negative. All right. Your probability is going to be, my annotations out, the probability of O positive plus the positive probability of O negative. So that's 0.374 plus 0.066. So that's 0.44. That's the probability of somebody being O blood type. All right, next question. What is the probability of having blood type B negative? I'm sorry, you have blood type B negative. What's the probability of being able to donate safely? This is obviously really well written. I wrote these, by the way. So being able to donate safely to a randomly sampled American. So again, let's read the table caption. Probability that a randomly chosen American will have a given blood type, A, B, and O, refer to the ABO blood types, and positive and negative refer to the RH factor. You have blood type B negative. What's the probability of you being able to donate safely to a randomly sampled American? Note that B negative is safe for blood types B positive, B negative, AB positive, or AB negative. So it's the probability of all of those added together. So B positive plus B negative plus AB positive plus AB negative is 0.085 plus 0.015 plus 0.034 plus 0.006. That's 0.14, 14% likelihood that you could donate. So that's two examples. Here's a third. You have blood type O negative. What's the probability of you being able to donate safely to a randomly sampled American? In case you didn't know, O negative is the universal donor. It has no antigens. It will not trigger an immune response in most donors. So regardless of your blood type. So the probability for this one is approximately 1. Just about all the time you can donate safely if you're O negative. So if you are O negative and you can handle having somebody take some blood, please do that sometimes. Okay, so you've already learned the general addition rule, but let's talk about it. Not all events are mutually exclusive. The general formula for adding probabilities when we don't have mutual exclusivity is as follows. The probability of A or B is the probability of A plus the probability of B minus the probability of both at the same time. So what we just learned is that if you see or, it means add. What you need to know is that if there is mutual exclusivity, the chance of them both happening at the same time is just 0. So we can cross that out. So if we have mutual exclusivity, we just don't have this bit, or we just call it 0, right? And that's what you see below. When events are mutually exclusive, probability of A and B is 0. When events aren't mutually exclusive, you got to calculate the probability of both. So here's a nice graphic of that. If we want to calculate basically the area that is orange, we need to calculate the probability of something being red and yellow, sorry, red or yellow, and then we need to subtract the middle part. And that'll tell us what the probability is of only being red or yellow. Okay, so the question was the probability of red or yellow. And there's a part here in the middle where we are both. So we have the probability of red plus the probability of yellow minus that probability where you're both. And that'll give us everything except for the orange bit. Okay. Practice with general addition. Let's go back to our blood type. What's the probability of someone having type O and positive blood? Hopefully I give you the answer this time. The probability of O is what we need. So we have the probability of O, which is we add these two probabilities together, plus the probability of positive, which is means we add. So we're going to add these. My pen. We're going to add these two together, and then we're going to add all the positives together as well. Right? And then we have to subtract the probability of O and positive, which is this bit. So let's clear that up and let's see. Probability of O plus the probability of positive plus the minus the probability of both. So we can see we did the math and you get 0.916. So now let's calculate the probability of something having type A blood or negative blood using the same principle. So go ahead and try that on your own and see what you come up with. I'm going to do it real quick and give you just a couple of minutes to get with it. Okay. Hopefully you've got this at least part of the way figured out. So probability of someone having type A or negative blood. So we have the probability of somebody having type A blood, which is 0.042. Sorry, 0.42. And then the probability of somebody having type negative blood, which is 0.15, minus the probability of both, which is 0.069. So we're going to get a probability of 0.501. Hopefully that worked out for you. If you've got that, you figured out adding probabilities. That's it. If you never want to do that again, that is probably fine. All right. Multiplying probabilities is going to come up, but first we have to learn independence. If we don't learn the assumption of independence, we can't talk about multiplying probabilities. So let's talk about independence. Independence, we've already talked about it just briefly in a previous lecture, but it's a concept in statistics and biology that's really, really important. We're going to see it again over and over again this semester. Two events are independent if the occurrence of one does not inform us about the probability that the second will occur. This is probably the single most important thing we're going to talk about in this lecture. So if you listen to anything, listen to this. Two events are independent again if the occurrence of one does not inform us about the probability the second will occur. Can you think of some examples? I could think of a couple. The probability of me rolling a 2 on a 6-sided die has nothing to do with my ability to then pick it up and roll a 6 next time, unless there's some kind of weight on the die. Same with a card. If I draw, well, actually, that's not true. If I draw a card out of a deck of 52 and it's a 2 of spades, and I don't put that card back in, and I draw another card, all of my probabilities are different. It's not independent anymore, right? If I need to draw another 2, I now only have a 3 in 51 chance of drawing a 2. So probabilities change in that example. If I put the card back in the deck and draw again, then I'm independent. It has nothing to do with what I just had, as long as I shuffle, of course. When the occurrence of one event provides some information about the results of another, those two are dependent. That would be the same. So drawing a card out of a deck changes the probability of every other card draw. That is dependence. Independence is important when you're multiplying probabilities, and here is why that works. The multiplication rule when events are independent are the probability of A and B happening at the same time is the probability of A times the probability of B. And probability and equals multiply and or equals add. If all events are independent, then the probability of many events happening is the product of all of their probabilities. So what's the probability of A and B and C and D? You multiply the probability of A by the probability of B, by the probability of C, by the probability of D, and you get your answer. Here's an example. According to some stats I found in the textbook, smoking and high blood pressure in the United States are related in the following way. About 17% of adults smoke and about 22% have high blood pressure. These two variables have been determined to be independent of one another, according to a paper that shows that smoking and high blood pressure are not correlated. I know that blood pressure and smoking could be correlated, and that correlation does not equal causation, and we can unpack that later in the semester. But according to this example, they are not related, which means they're independent. What's the probability of someone having both risk factors? So you would say the probability of smoking is 0.17. The probability of blood pressure being high is 0.22. So you'd multiply. I didn't even give you the math. 0.17 times 0.22. And you'd end up with the probability of having both is 0.0374 or 3.74%. That's pretty low. Here's another example that maybe is more your speed if you're into genetics. If you have peas, yellow pods are recessive, green are dominant, and there's a type that is a heterozygote that is also green. So that means the chance of a heterozygous offspring being green is 3/4. The genotype of each offspring is independent. A heterozygote has 10 offspring. What's the probability that all 10 are green? Probability of all 10 being green would be 3/4 times 10. Sorry, 3/4 to the 10th power. not times 10. You multiply 3/4 times 3/4 times 3/4 for all 10, and you end up with 5.6% chance that all of the offspring from a P, if it has 10 offspring, are going to be green, assuming a simple Mendelian cross. All right. Multiplying is easy. You just multiply. We can all do that. I've been doing all this on my phone. It takes 2 seconds. It's no big deal. But sometimes we have dependence. It's really common in biological sciences. It's going to be really common in ecological sciences. It's going to be really common in environmental sciences. What do we do? Here's a couple of examples. The biological sex of a sea turtle varies based on the temperature of the sand that the eggs are laid in. As the climate is warming, almost all sea turtles are now hatching as females. So that could be a problem, right? Warming is basically making all the turtles female, which means that there's no longer the ability for reproduction to happen very easily. That's a problem. We see something similar in jewel wasps, the wasps that are parasitic to fly pupa. They lay eggs, not F's, inside the pupal case. They feed on the fly, they emerge as adults, they mate, and then they lay more eggs. When a female finds a host that has not been previously parasitized, they lay eggs. If the host has already been parasitized, they lay more male eggs so that the sex ratio of the offspring and parasitation state of the host are dependent. So these are some dependence examples. Biological sex of a sea turtle dependent on temperature. The style of egg laying and the gender ratio that eggs are laid in jewel wasps also dependent on whether or not the fly has already been parasitized by another wasp. How do we deal with this probability, which is a real thing, of dependence happening in our calculations? Let's look at an example. This is that example of your jewel wasp. Probability that a host has already been parasitized is 20%. If the host is unparasitized, the probability of male eggs is 0.05, and probability of female eggs is 0.95. If the host is already parasitized, we change the ratio to mostly males, 90% male, 10% female. What's the probability that a new randomly chosen egg is male? How do we set this up? We say this. Has the host already been parasitized? If no, we start with 0.8. Is the sex of the new egg male or female? We can multiply based on which one we're trying to get. In this case, we're saying male. So 0.8 times 0.05. That gives us 0.04. The other chance of being male is 0.2 times 0.9, 0.18. Notably, when you're looking at this kind of chart, the probability from both arrows from the same vertex has to equal 1, right? So you've got 0.8 and 0.2, 0.9 and 0.1, 0.05 and 0.95. So the probability of an egg being male is 0.18 plus 0.04. So we calculated our probabilities of being male using the multiplication rule, and then we added them together using just simple addition, and that gives us our answer. All right, so finally, we can generalize the multiplication rule. Regardless of dependence, the general formula for multiplication of probability is, if you're looking for the probability of A and B happening, probability of A times the probability of B pipe A. The probability of B pipe A is the probability of B dependent upon A. It doesn't matter which event we label as A or B. If A and B are independent, then the probability of B being dependent on, or sorry, of B dependent on A is just the probability of B. Okay. So in our example, let's see if it'll pop up. Yeah. In our shorthand, we write P event condition. For example, probability of new egg being male is dependent upon the host previously parasitized as 0.9. We can apply the law of total probability to solve the wasp problem. The law of total probability states the following. The sum of all the probability of A is equal to the sum of all the values of B times the probability of B times the dependence factor. So the probability of A dependent upon B. So in our example, A is an egg is male, B is host parasitation state previously versus not previously. Probability of A is male is the probability of host parasitized times all of that plus all that other stuff. It comes out to be quite complicated. We end up with 0.2 times 0.9, 0.9 times 0.5, we get 0.22. So let's go back and look, which is just this here. 0.18 plus 0.04 equals 0.022. Sorry, 0.22. Exactly what we did before. Now you can just see like how you actually think through it in a more complicated example. It's a lot. It's a lot. And like I said, I'm not going to make us do tons of this. I just want you to see that there is conditional probability, basically. So we talked about the general multiplication rule, and then I showed you how to do conditional probability. We had already done it. We just gave it a name. So conditional probability works like this. Conditional probability is the probability of an event occurring given that a condition is met. This often sounds like an if-then statement, so A given B, something like that. I find this language to be a little confusing. It's always made me confused as a student, and we don't have to use this language, but just so you can now see, there are all these different ways to think about probability. We've added, we've multiplied, we've thought about dependence, and now we've talked about conditional. Okay. Another probability thing that matters is this idea of sampling without replacement. And this will become really important when you start thinking about how you do confidence interval calculations, which is something that's beyond this class, which is why this is the very last slide of the lecture. I just want you to know that this is a concept that exists. We've already talked about it. Sampling without replacement would be if I have my 52 card deck and I draw a card and I don't put it back in and then I draw another card. That's sampling without replacement. It changes the probability across all of my cards. Here's how we do the math. There are examples in which we have sampling without replacement. Our sample pool goes down every time we pull a sample. What do? Our example is the card deck. What's the probability of drawing a 3 of spades and then a 2 of clubs without returning cards to the deck? The probability of drawing a 3 of spades that very first time, that's 1 in 52. The probability of drawing a 2 of clubs, that's dependent upon the first card being drawn, that's 1 in 51. Unless we draw the 2 of clubs the first time, which we didn't because we have to draw the 3 of spades, the probability of getting the 2 of clubs the second time is 1 in 51. So the probability of 3 of spades and then 2 of clubs without returning cards to the deck, which is really long, is 1 in 52 times 1 in 51, and it equals 0.00037%, 37692. So it's what? 0.04%. Like, it's really just not going to happen. Not going to happen. Pretty rare. Okay, that's probability. If you're confused about any of this stuff, I'd encourage you to go back and check out the slides where you found yourself confused. You can also check out the Whitlock and Schluter book, and you can ask questions in class. I'm happy to try to talk through some of this stuff. I recognize that it can be a confusing topic. But again, the general point for us is to understand that probability matters and that it underlies most of the statistics that we're thinking about. But we don't necessarily have to know all of these details. This is just here for you as kind of an extra. If you want to explore this kind of thing more, I'd encourage you to check out some math classes, think about statistics courses beyond this one here at Bates, or come talk to me. Okay, see you next time.